What's up, everybody? Welcome aboard to Trading Live with Bubba on Tuesday, May the 20th. Well, I don't know what to tell you, but the action sucks. We're getting a little bit of a potential blow off here, but the volumes are so light that it's hard to really want to get involved in the market here. I think there was a big tip shown yesterday. You all know that we had the debt downgrade on Friday, and the markets did open lower on Sunday night, but there wasn't really any panic involved. There wasn't much going on. And of course, that brought us into a little bit of a rally. We're a little bit lower today, but no real action. Gold spiked up early. Again, it's very quiet, very tough to trade. And again, one of the things you have to remember about markets is when there's very little action, you're exposing yourself and putting yourself in danger in the market because there isn't enough action. So even though everything sets up the way you'd like it to, the reversal of what you're trying to do could happen because of the lack of activity. And I think that's something to, keep in mind. Certainly if we were busy, we'd be looking at buying into the indexes. But again, I'm not really all that excited. In fact, my regular everyday morning trading, which we do at 9:30 Eastern to 10:30, we're taking off until Friday just to trade the news Friday morning. But there isn't a lot to do here overall. So again, I would be just very careful and very cautious, and remember that the decision not to make a trade is just like making a trade. Okay, I think you have to keep yourself, sometimes in the observation mode versus the trying to be active. There's nothing to be active in here right now. It's a very challenging market right now. And I'm not looking to do much. I've made, on a busy day, I'll trade 3,000 contracts. And the last week, I might have traded 300. Okay. So again, I'm just saying to you that sometimes there's just nothing to do. And this appears to be one of them, that there's not a lot going on here. And I think instead of taking advantage of probability, I think you're giving up the edge of probability. Now there is a potential trade here in the euro currency. I'm going to pass it just because it's too quiet. But you would have sold, somewhere around here at 112.86 or so. Again, it's not like you couldn't do it now. I just choose not to. I choose not to be a big participant in these markets right now because of the lack of overall activity, because there's not much happening. I don't even have much of an opinion here, which is unusual. I usually have it. I don't trade to my opinion, but I usually have something that I think is going on. And I think there are trades that you can look at. And one of my favorite trades, okay, from a longer term perspective, is to be able to use the underlying. So one of the trade, again, if you have the capital to trade stock, I'd like to sell the spiders. I'd like to sell, for example, 300 shares of the spiders and buy 5 at the money calls for Friday, and then I would continue to roll those calls forward. That's a trade that if you have the capital, that you will not lose money on. It will make money. It's just how long will it take, and will you draw down while you're trying to make money? But the other side of that equation, and a trade that I do use quite a bit of, is I sell futures. So I'm selling the micro ES futures, or the MES, okay? And I would sell 6 of those, which equals, in delta terms, 6 MES equals 300 deltas. Okay, there are 50 deltas each if you're using them against an equity option. Okay, and I'm going to use them against the SPY. So if I sold 6 of those, I would have to buy 5 at the money calls. So right now, if I sold the MES at 59.60, for example, I would buy the 593 calls, okay, for the 23rd, which is Friday. Okay, buy the at the money calls 5 by 3. So if you do the math, basically you're short 300 deltas via the futures, and you're long 250 deltas via the options. So you have a slight lean to the short side, but if the markets explode to the upside, your delta on your calls will overtake the short on your futures, which will then give you a positive trade. Now, what we like to do is we like to roll every time our calls get to 80 deltas. We like to roll them back to the 50, capture some of the money, okay, and then re-enter at the money call and continue to roll that, so that we look for the break in the actual futures. And I'm going to show you. Hold on one second. I'm going to share with you a trade, okay, that is open right now. Okay, now this is the trade I'm going to show you is futures, options versus futures. Okay, but it'll be fine. Okay, I'll open it right now. Let's see where it opens. I got to see which screen it opens. Oh, there we go. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here is an open trade right now. Okay, and this trade has collected. Okay, we're short the futures. Okay, we're short. In this case, it's futures, options versus futures. So we're short 3 futures at, let's say, 5,500. Okay, we're trading at 59.50. So we're losing approximately 30% of 20,000. So we're losing about 6,000. We've got we've got a closed trade profit of around 4,500. Okay, so what that does for me is that gives me, I just need a little bit of a down move, but I can carry this trade and continue to capitalize on the options, okay, and continue to lock up profit while I'm waiting for a pullback. Okay, the one trick of this trade is that you have to have enough capital to continue to roll forward. You know, the margin issues come into play, and that is something that you can work on. But it's a great trade to make when you get extended. So if you look at, for example, if you look at the S&P right now, which is extremely overbought once again. Okay, so if we sold these, which we would, and bought calls, we're looking for the big pullback. But in the meantime, we are still collecting. We're still collecting credit and locking profits up. Although the trade itself is a net loss right now, I only need a small down move to get it profitable. And obviously a big down move would make us very profitable. And of course, the nice thing about the futures side is that you're working the futures 24 hours a day. Okay. You're working the exit on your futures. So if you happen to get, if you happen to be short futures and you get a big sell off, and if you go back to a couple of months ago when we had those 2 Mondays back to back where they got drilled, we actually made a lot of money on those trades because we got our futures off and then ended up being just long the calls. Okay. Now again, it sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it has to take a lot of patience to work it and keep it. But that's what we're doing, is we're setting up a position that we can be in the trade, because again, you can see that volume falls off every single day. I mean, this is very, very pathetic of the trading action. If you look at Apple, I mean, what are you going to do here? Buy it or sell it? I don't know. Okay. I mean, you would probably think of more buying than selling because it had some bad news and this is all it can do to it. But, you know, Amazon, once again, you're in the middle of nowhere. We did have a sale last week, which we did make. Okay. And we had an okay week last week. Not great, but okay. You know, from our 2 calls last week. Coin, this would be one to look at the sell. And of course, it is going into the S&P, which created the bigger rally. Certainly, I would, you know, you could consider, you know, making this trade here, selling here. But again, I'm not really interested in doing much of anything right now. That's one of the things that I'm saying to you, is that for my money, this market is not active enough. I'm not really overly interested in trading. Okay. I think that sometimes it's better to observe the market and not be overly involved. And I happen to think this is the case now. This overwhelming lack of activity in the markets tells me that there's not much to do. So why would I want to get overly involved into a very quiet market? Because what happens is you get some of these big vacuum trades that the market suddenly move wildly. Again, if they work in your favor, great. But normally the case is they'll run to your stop, take you out, and then go the way you want it to, which then creates some emotional imbalance. But right now, there's no trade to be made right here. Okay. I mean, again, what should I do here? Nothing. Okay. So if I go back and look and see if there's some spreads of selling, and as I said, I'm really not interested in doing much of anything. Crowd is not really extended. Meta is not really extended. Google is not really extended yet. IWM is doing nothing. Microsoft is doing nothing. MSTR is doing nothing. So again, I share with you that there's really not much to do here. So why should I get over involved? NVIDIA, which we sold last week, was fine. Okay. So the things we've done have worked for the most part. We've had a couple of losers. But at the end of the day, at this point, I'm not even all that interested in even getting involved. You know, it's a holiday week, so you can assume that the volume's going to slow down. It's already slow, but you can assume it's going to get slower. Okay. The Qs, there's really nothing here. SMCI, nothing here. XYZ, spiders. So again, you can see that there is not an overwhelming amount of, Tesla would be one to look at, certainly, if you're interested in trading. Me personally, I am not going to make many trades. I will, if there happens to be a no-brainer that shows up, I'll take it. I'm not afraid to trade. But again, I don't see where my edge is. When you remember, we're looking for 4,000 to 5,000 contracts in the Dow, and you're trading under 1,000. I'm looking for 4,000 to 5,000 in the Russell, and we're trading under 1,000. I'm looking for 10,000 in the Nasdaq, and I'm under 5. And I'm looking for 20,000 in the S&P, and I'm under 10 and under 5 and a big percentage of it. So where's my opportunity? Where does our edge come in when we're trying to trade? And I think when you can learn to develop that and say, hey, I recognize that I can't really get an advantage here in the market, then I probably want to stay out. Now, I would certainly, on those ratio trades, I would certainly put on gold. Okay. So the MGC against GLD. I would certainly put on the MES against the spider. I would certainly consider putting on the NASDAQ or the MNQ against the QQQ. And remember, the ratio is 5 to 6. If you understand Delta, when it's a product against its own derivative, so the SPY against the SPY options, the SPY stock is 100 deltas, and we're trading the at-the-monies. Okay, so we do 3, that's minus 300, and 5 is 250. When you're trading the futures against the options, against equity options, okay, the futures options are 500 deltas versus the 50 deltas of the at-the-money call or put. Okay, so again, there's a equation across, and the SPY is 1/5 the size of the ES. And the simple way to figure that out is one ES is worth almost $300,000. Almost. Okay. It's 59.64 divided by 2. Okay. So it's 296,065, somewhere around there. Okay. Versus 100 shares of the SPY is 59,300. So again, so to multiply it by 5, and of course, if you understand the floor, if you've ever traded on the floor, obviously the ratio is always 5 to 1. Okay, the spiders against the future 5 to 1. So we ended up at 6 to 5 because the micros were actually trading 60% of a future, right? 10 micros equal 1 big future. So we trade 6 of them. which then becomes 300 delta. So we need to trade 5 options. So when we're doing equity options against micro futures, the ratio is 6-5. If you're doing futures against futures options, the ratio is 5-3. And if you're doing stock options against stock, the ratio is 5-3. Okay. The 3 is always, except in the 6-5, but that division is always the underlying or the future. Okay. But it's a great way to learn how to trade. Okay. And be able to hold on to positions knowing that you are going to be rewarded should you get a huge move. And the funny thing is if you get a big move in either direction, you're going to be rewarded. Okay. Because again, the delta changes. If I open the trade at a minus 50 delta and I get a huge up move, okay, my 300 delta stays constant at minus 300, but my 250 can go as high as 500. So I can actually end up being net long on a position that I set up to be net short on. So again, these are just little things to think about in the structure of the market, because at the end of the day, you have to be able to have more ways to trade. So I'm participating, even though I'm not trading actively right now, I am participating in the market, and it's not doing much of anything, but I don't have to worry about it. All I'm going to do is wait to either roll up my long calls that I own against my short futures and take some profit off the table. Or if we do nothing, then on Friday, I'll roll them to the following Friday. But that's a position that I can carry for an extended period of time. And again, we'll work more on this, but if you have any questions about that, you can certainly feel free to ask them. But right now, anything you should be doing right now would be more or less looking to build those types of positions or to be selling credit. I don't really think there's much overall to do. Trying to get a little tempted with a rally right now. But overall, where have we gone? I mean, we're in nowheresville. There's no action, no movement, nothing really to do. So why should I try to, force myself into a trade, okay, when the markets are not really moving? Okay, your opinion should not counter. We don't have an opinion. We have to just let the markets dictate what we should do here. And we're getting, like I said, a little bit of a rally, but there's really not much overall going on. So again, that's why I use the ratio spreads. I do a lot of weighted double diagonals. Okay. So probably a good time for calendar spreads as well, if you know how to do those. But we'll start working on that stuff next week when we come back. Because again, this holiday stuff is just very, very challenging to want to trade in a holiday when there's such a lack of overall activity and volume in the market. I think it makes it much more challenging, and I think it makes you much more suspect to making errors and getting yourself involved in positions that you don't belong in. And that's one of the things that I try to teach everybody is don't stare at the machine. There's nothing to do here. I mean, again, if we're going to get busy, you can always look and take a peek. But to sit here and stare at this thing all day is really a fool's errand, the way that I would look at it. I don't see a lot to really do. Okay. And again, I'd love to trade. I'd love to give winning trades. Okay. But I hate to get involved when, if we all traded at the same time, we would affect our own liquidity right now because of the lack of activity. And I think that's something to be very concerned and very, very aware of. Okay. So in the meantime, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you back here. Thursday, I'll be recorded because I'm going to take the day off. But we will be back live next Tuesday. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you later.
You know how the financial world goes. Here comes the buzzkill. Please make sure to take some time to read this boring disclaimer. We will owe you one.